Yo, what is up people? Cubic here with a long overdue tutorial. First off, let me just say, new year, new glasses baby. Yeah, so today we are about to go over the spectral warp modes in Vital. What do they do? How can I use them? Should I use them? Hopefully this video will help you figure that out, so let's just get right into it.
Hello, please excuse the interruption.
Now, before we get started, guys, if you could please leave a like on this video and subscribe if you want more content like this, that'd be super helpful, help more people see this video, and it just helps me out with the testy-ass YouTube algorithm and getting my hard work seen by others. So I would really appreciate that if you could do that before we get started, but let's get into it. So I'm here with Vital, obviously. Now, don't pay too much attention to this. This is, I guess I'm revealing a video of the future, possibly. We'll see how that goes, but ignore that. I basically just got this wavetable I found in Glorgunk's pack, along with some distortion, compression, and an EQ. And we're going to be using this sound to kind of go over what the various spectral warp modes are and how to use them, what they do to your sounds or to your wavetable. So yeah, we're going to just start off with Vocode. So basically what Vocode does is it shifts around the formants, but in a kind of key tracked way so that it keeps your formant steady no matter what note you play. So you can already hear all the various possibilities you can use Vocode for. Basically, it gives a kind of vocal vocoder characteristic to your sounds as well. Something in particular that it works really well for is using it with a text-to-speech table.
Cubic.
Alright, so we've got a text-to-speech here saying cubic, and then we're going to put Vocode on and let it work its magic.
Cubic. 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 Cubic.
And so as you can hear, it shifts around the format of the text-to-speech vocal, but it stays very clean.
Cubic.
And like I said earlier, the format kind of stays steady no matter what note you press. You don't get super vastly different timbres and kind of almost pitches of format shifting like you would with the format scale. Which is another way to shift formants. It sort of moves the harmonics up and down the spectrum a lot further than the Vocode mode does, while still maintaining the original harmonic structure of the sound. So it still keeps it relatively clean, just you get different timbres, different formants, different kind of vowels like the Vocode, but it's just a little more exaggerated and it doesn't have any sort of key tracking to go along with it. Now, to listen to the difference between Vocode and format, I'd say when you're using the format scale on a bass, I'd say it's just a bit more of a crispier format shift than Vocode. But they're both pretty similar. It's very subtle differences and then the ways you can modulate them. So basically, if you're trying to just shift the format around or change the timbre of your sound, Vocode or format scale both work great, and kind of just go between them, figure out which one works better for what you're trying to do. So next we've got harmonic stretch, which basically all it does, if you want to visualize it, you can visualize it like when you detune voices in a sound. Imagine that there's the fundamental harmonic that your wavetable is based off of, and then it's just taking all the other harmonics around it and spreading them out wider and wider away from each other. Now, using harmonic stretch is great for making screech noises, FMing it into other sounds. You can also just get some wonky sounds. It's a way to kind of pitch things up and down, but a bit differently than you would just transposing. It's a bit more similar to, for instance, phase plant changing the harmonics of one of the oscillators. And I've found that around 62% is a really nice sweet spot for a lot of sounds. Something else that I found harmonic stretch really useful for is just doing weird LFO automations on it. You can get some really cool like space lace vibe acid sounds out of it as well as some really high pitch, kind of glitchier, more sci-fi alarm sounds, just doing some cool modulations with harmonic stretch. Next, we've got inharmonic stretch, which is basically just like harmonic stretch, but without as even of a pattern. It's kind of a bit more chaotic and doesn't retain a lot of harmonic tonality. It's inharmonic, like it says. As you can see, it's more of these like inharmonic, metallic, almost like a bell or like crystal-y sound. So obviously if you're trying to make some really cool futuristic metallic sounds, or maybe go along the Voltra side of things, just these shiny sounds like that, inharmonic stretch is your go-to. And, you know, I just figured it out just here, but you can make some really guttural screech growl things. So yeah, inharmonic stretch, very interesting, something to mess around with. Now next we've got smear. Now smear is an interesting one where it doesn't keep your wavetable unaffected by keeping it in the middle like most of the other warp modes. Your wavetable starting point is down at the bottom. So this one's a little weird. I think of it more as like a spectral high pass. Basically, it just takes harmonics and starts spreading them up and up until it kind of just high passes your sound, or like smears your sound out of existence. So this might feel familiar if you're coming from Razor or Harmor. It gives some of those same sort of additive synthesis phasery sounds, and I believe smear is actually a control in Harmor. I don't remember, but basically I use this kind of, like I said, like a spectral high pass. So you can already hear there's so many possibilities. That sound I just made probably felt a bit familiar to you. It's kind of, it gives that high pass whippy feeling, but it has just this kind of squelchy spectral like sci-fi vibe to it. I don't know how to explain it. I also use smear a lot if I'm trying to create my own noises. I know there's a noise sampler, but sometimes I'll just use the third oscillator as just a layer to add this kind of high pass noise. And depending on your wavetable, it can really make it kind of noisy or add some sort of cool texture to just rest on top of your sound. Next, we've got random amplitudes. Now, this is another one of the Voltra warp modes where basically this is a filter that takes harmonics out of your wavetable really sharply. And so it creates this weird kind of ringy spectral like thin effect throughout your whole wavetable. And even though it says random, it's not random every time. It always shifts your wavetable the same way each time. But this is how you can get some really wacky, weird like Voltra spectral sounds. Now you do have to be careful. This one really shapes the harmonic content of your wavetable and can really make things sound like completely out of tune and wonky. So you have to be really careful with how you use this. Sometimes I apply the note modulator to this one as well as inharmonic and harmonic stretch if I get it to the right point. But random amplitudes definitely one of those warp modes where you kind of have to find that sweet spot. Sometimes everything else will sound like shit except for this one little perfect spot. So next we've got phase disperse. I like to just call it disperser. It's kind of helped me understand how kilohertz disperser works a little bit more, because basically what phase disperser does is it moves the phase of all the sounds in your wavetable over, turning kind of clicky sounds into these like wet, squishy sounds, and you can get some similar sounds you'd get from using a disperser. So a really interesting warp mode to mess around with. If you bring the transpose down a lot when you're using phase disperse on something, you can it makes it almost bubbly. So yeah, wild stuff with the phase disperse. Next, we've got the low pass and the high pass. So these are pretty much just low pass and high pass filters built into the wavetable that actually warp the wavetable rather than putting a filter onto your sound after the fact. Personally, I use this whenever I need a low pass or high pass filter and I'm not already using a different spectral warp. I'll just use the spectral warp version rather than one of these two filters so I can have more availability in terms of the amount of filtering I can do to a sound. You'll notice these are pretty sharp, just like spectral filters. And we'll go to the high pass. But like I said earlier, I enjoy using smear as a high pass instead, but that's just me. Getting down to the bottom here, we get to the Shepard tone. So with Shepard tone, basically you spectrally morph between the original wave and an octave version of the wave, pitching the waveform into that. So if you know what a Shepard's tone is, it's basically like a never-ending riser. Now this isn't quite the same as that, but it's a really interesting way to kind of pitch shift your sounds up. It's really clean, and it's a really interesting way to add vibrato to your sound. So yeah, I've actually never really a good use for this sound yet, most likely because I just haven't played with it enough. But yeah, I imagine for effects and or to mimic sort of analog tape sounds and stuff like that, it could come in handy. But again, I haven't done enough with it to really give you a solid use for it. But definitely just one of those things, mess around with it. Maybe you'll find something cool. And hey, if you find something cool to do with it, please comment down below. Let everybody else know, share the knowledge. All right, so finally, we've got Spectral Time Skew. Now this one's interesting. I don't completely understand how it works, but basically it moves through the wavetable position at different speeds for each harmonic. And so basically you can think of it as like as an alternative, more spectral, phasey wavetable position mover. And now it's very dependent on the wavetable you use, and if you have things like detune on, you can get some cool, more spectral, again, Voltra kind of vibes from it sometimes that are kind of like a less kind of metallic, corpusy, random amplitudes. But this is another one of those ones where you just find the little sweet spots. That's interesting. So yeah, that's Spectral Time Skew. Just think of it as like a weird spectral wavetable position. Another way to find cool new timbres for your sound and just find weird little sweet spots. And it honestly feels a bit more crisp and clean than the wavetable position on certain sounds. But again, like I said, it really depends on the wavetable because, like, for instance, this one, very different effect on it. So definitely mess with all these spectral warp modes. So hopefully that helps you guys understand a bit more about the spectral warp modes available in Vital, what they do, cool ways to use them. Let me know what your favorite spectral warp mode is and cool ways you found to use these modes. So yeah, that's been another episode of my Vital Masterclass, or whatever you want to call it. I think I still have 2 more things to do, going over the browser and going over the phase warp modes. But other than that, this is kind of wrapping this series up. Yeah, so thanks for all the support you guys have given me so far, and I will see you all in the next production tutorial. That being said, my name's Qbik, and yeah, have a great fucking day, everybody. Hopefully this helped.